The Philadelphia Eagles are banking on young players to step up even more in 2025. What big steps do we need to see from year 2 and year 3 players next season? We'll get into it coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Thanks so much for tuning into this Wednesday edition of the show. We're brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download Gametime today. What time is it? It is game time. Louis DiBiase here, joining you on this Wednesday edition of the show. And after the owners' meetings yesterday, had a lot of takeaways from what Howie Roseman said to the media, Jeffrey Lurie, Nick Sirianni. And I think it's interesting, not surprising, but interesting that both Lurie and Roseman have now really highlighted preparing to pay young players on rookie contracts down the road as a reason for their more conservative offseason, for their reasoning behind letting Josh Sweat go, and Milton Williams, and Mekhi Becton, and Isaiah Rodgers, and Oren Burks, and pretty much every free agent, including Darius Slay as well, that was hitting the open market. The Eagles are cutting out that middle class, those C+ to B+ players. They're banking on rookies, younger players on rookie deals, taking over those positions and maybe rising to even bigger roles. Like, that is what the Eagles are doing. They're paying their A tier, and if you're not in the A tier, you're likely not going to get an extension that's close to an A tier contract. If you're somebody like Reed Blankenship who's going to accept a deal that's closer to who he actually is as a player, then yeah, you're going to stay. But if you're a Milton Williams who's not quite a Jalen Carter, but you're demanding Jalen Carter money in the open market and a team's willing to pay that, odds are the Eagles aren't going to get involved in that market, because they're also banking on a lot of these young guys becoming A-tier players, or they already are, like a Jalen Carter, like a Quinyon Mitchell or a Cooper DeJean, or I think Nolan Smith's getting there, and you're preparing to pay those guys moving forward. And that's exactly what Howie Roseman has talked about. That's exactly what Jeffrey Lurie said again yesterday. So that's the blueprint. They're expecting big things from those young players to take over as the new core, and they're also expecting some other young players to step up and be as good of role players as a Josh Sweat was, or a Mekhi Becton, or a Milton Williams. And so today I want to talk about those players and what we need to specifically see from those guys, the role players to fill the shoes of those departed free agents, but not just them, the rising stars as well. Like, what do we need to see more of from Jalen Carter, from Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean? I think it's a fascinating discussion getting into the development plan of these players, because although these guys have been incredible over a short period of time, it's been just that, a short period of time. So a lot of this is still projection based. It's not for Jalen Carter. I think he's established as a stud, but Nolan Smith was really, really good for one half of a season, right? I shouldn't say one half, but the majority of a season, but it was for like 13 games where he was really elite. Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, it was only one season. Like, we've seen flashes in the pan before that don't pan out long-term, even in Philadelphia. So what do we need to see from this young core? Let's start with the stars. Let's start with specifically the defensive line, Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, who already last year were asked to do a lot more with a reduced role for Brandon Graham, then an injury with the departure of Hassan Reddick, the retirement of Fletcher Cox. Those guys really had to step up. This year, now without Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, you're getting even younger on defense and even more inexperienced. You're going to be asking even more from those Bulldogs. What I think you need to see more of from Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith is just consistency. The star level of play that they were on in the playoffs, down the stretch, those elite performances against Green Bay, specifically Los Angeles, the NFC Championship against Washington, the Super Bowl against Kansas City. These two combined for 6 sacks in the playoffs, 2 for Jalen Carter in that Rams game, 4 for Nolan Smith total, which is a franchise record for sacks in a single postseason. They combined for 13 quarterback hits and 2 forced fumbles in the postseason. Like, these guys are already bona fide stars. I think you could make the argument Jalen Carter is the most disruptive, impactful defensive tackle in the game. If he's not one, he's definitely top 3. If you don't think he's top 3, you cannot make the argument he's outside of the top 5. So for Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith, it's all about just sustaining the level of play we saw down the stretch in 2024. I don't need to see them do anything specifically that we haven't seen yet, but we saw them break out and be game wreckers. Like, not just really good. Jalen Carter was really good in 2023. He had really good moments of being a monster early last year. But then it was game after game after game, where he was completely wrecking the ball game. He was an elite player that you were winning because of every single matchup, and it felt like the same for Nolan Smith. We need to see them sustain that and not have it go back to where it was earlier in the year and their rookie years, where it was more few and far between, where they had a really high floor, but you didn't always see, like, there were some games that they weren't as much of a factor, and you can't ask these guys to have 2+ sacks every single week, but I do think you should expect them to be as consistent as they were getting to the quarterback as they were down the stretch, right? And it's not always their fault. Like, Jalen Carter commands a lot of attention. He's going to command even more double teams in 2025 with his reputation after that playoff run. So it's not all him. But Aaron Donald commanded that kind of attention too in LA. And if you're going to be the next Aaron Donald, like Jalen Carter wants to be, like his ceiling presents himself to be, Aaron Donald early in his career was getting 8 to 10 to 12 sacks a year. And Jalen Carter had 6 in 2023. He had 4.5 in 2024, plus 2 sacks in the playoffs, so 6.5 total. I want to see him get closer to the double-digit number this year. If he's going to be that number 1 player at his position, that's where I want to see him get to. That level of play week after week, he is just a game wrecker. Even if it's double teams, it doesn't matter. He's getting to the quarterback. I want to see him get close to double-digit sacks. And it's very similar for Nolan Smith. It's just all about sustaining the level of play we saw in the Super Bowl run. Like, you play the way he did down the stretch for a 17-game schedule, and that's a star pass rusher. That's what the Eagles got. Nolan Smith down the stretch last year was looking like 2022 Hassan Reddick, like 2017 Brandon Graham. Like, that's how good this kid was in year 2. And like I said, they're going to have to carry the load even more this year without Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. You hope Moro Ujoma can step up, and Jordan Davis and Jalix Hunt and some rookies that you draft, and Azeez Ojulari, Joshua Uche, maybe Bryce Huff. But these are the 2 on the defensive line now. There's no more Fletcher Cox coming to save you, or a Brandon Graham, or heck, even an experienced player like a Josh Sweat or a Milton Williams. Like, no, it's on these 2 now. It already was their defensive line last year. It's even more so them this year. And so I think for them, it's just all about sustaining that level of play. And I think it's the same for Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. But one thing specifically I do want to see more of that we didn't get a lot in their rookie year, and some of it was just by pure luck, by the will of the football gods. Quinyon Mitchell just could not buy interceptions last year. Same with Cooper DeJean, despite how good they were. I want to see more turnovers, more playmaking on the ball in 2025. Now, to their own credit, in their defense, a lot of the times it was hard for them to make a play on the football because the football wasn't going their way. So, in a way, it's kind of a good thing. They didn't make as many plays on the ball. They didn't have as many pass deflections as other corners or interceptions. But I do want to see more picks because the opportunities were there for Quinyon Mitchell. I want to see him hit the jugs machine all spring, all summer long. There were some moments where he jumped the route and just dropped the ball. Sometimes Chauncey Gardner-Johnson ran into him or stole the ball from him, and it just felt like Quinyon couldn't buy it. But the opportunities were there, and you started to see him capitalize in the playoffs. He had an interception, a game-sealing pick against Green Bay, had a game-sealing interception against Washington in the wild card round in the NFC Championship. Cooper DeJean, of course, we saw his first career pick six, his first career interception go for a touchdown in the Super Bowl on his birthday against Kansas City. What a story. So they started to get it going in the playoffs. 3 picks combined in the postseason between these 2. But I want to see those guys. Quinyon Mitchell should have 4 to 6 sacks interceptions next year. Sacks would be incredible. I want to see him get 4 to 6 picks. Like, I want to see him be the guy that replaces Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's interception total, which was 6 last year. That's a lot of picks out the door. And Darius Slay was a good playmaker too. I think that's the one department that they really need Q and Coop to step up in is the interception department, because Darius Slay and Chauncey, that's a lot of picks going out the door. And Reed Blankenship's good for, I feel like, 3 to 4 a year. But one of these other guys, they're going to get into that category as well. And again, it's a good thing that a lot of the time the football wasn't going their way last year, but I think there were some opportunities, and I think I want to see them capitalize on that. Outside of that, it's just, like I said, it's about sustaining play. I mean, those two had 2 of the best rookie years that I've seen. Both were Rookie of the Year finalists. For all 4 of those alphas on the defense, heading into year 2 and year 3, your top 2 picks in the last 2 drafts, it's all about sustainability. For the role players, though, stepping up in year 2 and year 3, I think there's definitely more work to be done with their development in the offseason. I want to talk coming up next about Jordan Davis, Moro Ijoma, Tyler Steen, Kelee Ringo, and more. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. This year, I got to go to Eagles-Browns through Gametime after the bye week. It was the game that started it all. Started a 16-1 run to a Super Bowl 59 victory, and that was all through Gametime. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Gametime comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Gametime picks, curates easy-to-find, better-value tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Their lowest price guarantee will credit you 110% of the difference if you find better prices with another platform, and you're not going to. Plus, they got peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee. You can buy and book with total confidence. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code in all capital letters, Locked On NFL, for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, that's Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so we're talking about the development plan for year 2 and year 3 players that are going to be asked to do even more in 2025 as they try to help the Eagles repeat as Super Bowl champions. They would join the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs in the 21st century to repeat as champs if they're able to get it done. If they are able to get it done, they need guys like Moro Ijoma, Jordan Davis, Jalix Hunt, Tyler Steen. They need them to match the level of play we saw last year from Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Mekhi Becton. We need to see Kelee Ringo be similar to what we saw from Darius Slay. And I don't think that's all that crazy. Like, yeah, what we're remembering of Josh Sweat and Milton Williams are historic Super Bowl performances, right? But that's not who they were all year. I mean, Milton Williams was. He was the most efficient defensive tackle pass rusher in football. But we all know still, though, he was benefiting a lot from Jalen Carter's double teams. Was Milton Williams a 1A defensive tackle? Like, no. I think Moro Ijoma, who had similar pass rush numbers last year, with a bigger sample size, can be a poor man's version of Milton Williams. Josh Sweat was incredible in the Super Bowl, but he was very up and down all year. I don't know if Jalix Hunt's going to have 8 sacks this year and lead the team in that number, but I think Jalix Hunt can be who Josh Sweat was during the regular season and then turn it on in the playoffs. Jalix Hunt was great in the Super Bowl. I thought he was really good as well. His best game of the year might have come against the Rams and the Commanders, back-to-back games. I mean, those 3 games after Green Bay down the stretch in the playoffs, the divisional round, the NFC title, and the Super Bowl, Jalix Hunt was amazing. So as long as I'd like to see him put on a little more strength, get some more counter moves, some power. I think that's the big thing for Jalix Hunt, but I could absolutely see him being who Josh Sweat was in 2024. And for Moro Ijoma, it's the same question I have that I do for Jalix Hunt. It's, can they develop more as refined pass rushers, and with a bigger workload, can they be as efficient as they were last year? I think they can be, but Moro Ijoma didn't play nearly as much as he's going to in 2025. I will say, though, I mean, they did trust him a lot in, like, do-or-die situations. Like, he was out there for that big play against the Rams, backed up in their own end zone in the playoffs when Jalen Carter sacked Matt Stafford on 3rd down. I mean, Moro Ojomo was out there in some big moments last year. They trusted him, so I think they're banking on him panning out. And Jeffrey Lurie actually mentioned him specifically by name in his press conference yesterday. So they're expecting big things from those two, and I think those are the two that I'm most confident in taking a big step in year 2 and year 3 for Ojomo, year 2 for Jalen Carter. So for those guys, I think it's just working on their technique, becoming more refined pass rushers. For Jalen Hunt, I think it's more putting on some strength, winning with power, not just speed, having counter moves. I think that's a big thing. Sustaining your play against the run as a more undersized edge rusher. Definitely want to see that continue. And just continue to develop. Like, he's still a raw player that has only played the edge rusher position for a few years. Remember, this was a converted safety that has only played as a pass rusher for a couple seasons. So I think for him, it's just working on that craft. And for Moro Ojomo, it's sustaining the efficiency with a higher volume of snaps this year. Like, he's not going to play as much as Milton Williams. I think it'll be more of an even split with Jordan Davis and a rookie that you draft. But he's going to be that second guy at the end of the year in total snaps at this position behind Jalen Carter. So for them, continue to develop your pass rush moves and be efficient with a higher volume of snaps. For Jordan Davis, it's really interesting. I think for Jordan Davis, he needs to be able to play more and get to the quarterback to take another step. Like, if he is who he's been these first 3 years, like, that's not a bad player to have. But without Milton Williams, like, wouldn't it be really nice? It'd be a nice surprise to be able to rely on your first round pick that you traded up for instead of, I'm talking about a day 3 guy in Moro Ojomo. I'm discussing drafting rookies that'll have to step up. Like Jordan Davis, if he can be the player he was in the NFC Championship in the Super Bowl, 2 sacks against Washington, he had one against Kansas City. If he can take that year 4 step like Dexter Lawrence did for the Giants, year 4, it's interesting. That's actually where the 2 players that I've always compared Jordan Davis to, his ceiling, is Dexter Lawrence and Vita Vea. I think both of those players really took that next step as a pass rusher. They were great run stoppers like Davis in the first 3 years of their career. Year 4 is when they started to get to the quarterback. Jordan Davis is entering year 4. The Eagles have a decision coming up about his 5th-year option. They could try to extend his contract. If he can take that step, that would be massive. Does he need to for them to extend him? Probably not. I think he could get a Reed Blankenship-like extension as a role player, still a solid number. It's a good player to have. Like, he's always going to be one of the most efficient defensive tackles in football against the run. But I don't think that's enough, right? I think right now he's in that Nelson Aguilar, Derek Barnett type of first-round label for me, where I wouldn't say he was a bust, but the value that you placed on him, he's not meeting that value, that ceiling you expected, unless he gets to the quarterback. So for me, I think he's got to stay in shape, he's got to stay healthy, and he's got to be able to play more. Like last year, his snaps were even lower than they were in 2022 and 2023. Like, he was out-snapped by both Milton Williams and Moro Ojomo. A lot of that, I think, at times is conditioning, although he looked a lot healthier and in shape last year than 2023 when he clearly hit a wall. After like 11 or after that Buffalo game, I feel like he really hit a wall. But a lot of it, too, is that like he still is really raw as a pass rusher. Outside of just a bull rush, Jordan Davis doesn't have a swim move, like any sort of counters. He still has to work on his technique. But Clint Hurt, I'm really confident in his ability to develop defensive line talent. He did it in Seattle. I was a big fan of what they were doing over there with the Seahawks on that young defensive line. Jordan Davis was really taking strides in the playoffs as a pass rusher. Clint Hurt and Jordan Davis, that relationship in year 2, I think that could do wonders for his development. So for Jordan Davis, it's becoming that pass rusher that I don't think we're expecting him to be anymore, but it would be a really nice surprise. A couple other guys to get into here. Tyler Steen, I think he needs to get better as a pass blocker. Like, I think he's really strong in the run game, but he hasn't been consistent enough to sell this team on him being the guy. I think they know there's a floor with Tyler Steen that they can get by with Steen because you have 4 elite offensive linemen around him. Like, he's not going to kill you in a game. But the Eagles don't like to settle on the offensive line, and they're always going to be looking for more if he can't be more consistent. And that's what Nick Sirianni said as well in his press conference during the owners' meetings. A reporter asked, what does Steen need to do to really convince you he's the guy at right guard so you stop looking for the Mekhi Bectons, the Quinyon Greens, maybe a first or second round pick this year. They met with Dylan Fairchild, the Georgia guard, today. So they're doing their due diligence on interior offensive linemen. I think pass blocking consistency is really where he needs to get better. I think he needs to be stronger, like hit the weight room this offseason. That's a big thing heading into training camp. But right now, I think the Eagles just see him as an average starter, and I really think Quinyon Green's going to have an opportunity to win that job. And then in the secondary, it's Kelee, Ringo, and Sidney Brown. Kelee Ringo, what's his development plan this year? Look, I love the way he plays press man coverage. He's a physical corner. If he gets his hands on you at the line of scrimmage and bumps you off your route, good luck. And his straight line speed is elite. Ran a 4.34, I believe, come out of Georgia at the Combine a few years ago. I think lining off the ball and off-man coverage coming downhill is a strength of his as well. I think he could be a really good playmaker. I love the way he developed as a tackler in year 2. I think being a gunner on special teams did wonders for his development. The big thing I want to watch for Kelee Ringo is I think he needs to improve his lateral agility, like mirroring receivers. If you're playing soft press coverage where you're not jamming him at the line and you're kind of just shadowing him, those in and out routes, those choice routes can really hurt him. I want to see how he's developed his technique. I think he got better a lot last summer in that department, but still when he came in at times last year, you could still see that lateral stiffness. And for Vic Fangio's defense, you got to be able to you can't be a one-trick pony, right? You got to be able to play off-zone coverage. Like, I think he needs to improve his zone coverage as well, his vision, passing receivers off over the middle of the field. I think those are the two big things, improving in zone coverage and then improving his lateral agility. So with Ringo, I love the traits. They're there. He has some big-time strengths, the straight line speed, the physicality, the wingspan. Now can he put it all together and be Darius Slay this year? I think he can match that production. I mean, as a third corner, I think Kelee Ringo is going to do just fine. And then one more player here before we take our final break, Sidney Brown at safety. What does he have to do to convince his team not to draft a Malachi Starks or a Nick Emenwari? I think two things. Number one, he's got to play less reckless. I mean, this guy, he's a fun watch. I remember watching him down in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. The dude plays like his hair's on fire. I mean, he's just flying from sideline to sideline, and he's so explosive. And that's a really good trait to have as a safety when you can cover that much ground. And a safety is asked to do a lot in Vic Fangio's defense. So I do think that's a strength. But there are times these last 2 years where he is flying downhill, and he takes the worst angle on a running back or a tight end or a slot receiver, and he misses the tackle because he's coming in too hot, and he's taking the wrong angle because he's reckless. Like, he just wants to take a guy's head off. I think he needs to come in more controlled, use that speed, but it's like learning how to be like in a superhero movie when they're just coming up and they don't know how to use their powers yet, right? Like that's Sidney Brown. So I think improving his tackling angles and also coverage, his man coverage ability, that's going to be key for him to be the starter next to Reed Blankenship. So those are 5 guys the Eagles are really banking on being that middle class of this roster now that they let a lot of these free agents go. Jordan Davis, Moro Ijoma, Jalix Hunt, Tyler Steen, Kelee Ringo, and Sidney Brown. A lot of these guys have shown some really good things on tape, but there is still a lot they need to work on development-wise this offseason. Those are some of their points to work on for sure. All right, guys, we'll wrap up this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles coming up next. What rookie position do you think will have the biggest role? What player that gets drafted for the Eagles this year could come in right away and be heavily relied on more than any other position? We'll get into that coming up next as we wrap up this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, wrapping up this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles, getting into the development plan of a lot of year 2 and year 3 players for the Eagles on offense, and I would say mostly defense, right? They let a lot of guys go on defense in free agency. They're banking on a lot of their year 2 and year 3 players to step up and be those solid B-plus role players to your stars like Jalen Carter, Zach Bond, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean, to be like the new version of, like, to be a Reed Blankenship, to be a Josh Sweat, to be a Milton Williams. But all these guys, they're not just going to be handed the job. Howie Roseman said it the other day. They're going to have to earn it. They will get competition brought in the draft. The Eagles have to draft somewhere, right? I mean, and I think a lot of these positions, like, they want these players on their roster to win the job, but they're also going to prepare for the scenario where they don't win the job. Sidney Brown doesn't take that step. Kelee Ringo does not get in the good graces of Vic Fangio, and I don't know if he really was last year. I think Vic Fangio liked Isaiah Rodgers better than Kelee. So they're going to draft players at these positions to push these guys. What rookie that comes in will have the biggest opportunity to have a massive role in this year's Super Bowl run? I think there's a lot of positions. Defensive tackle, an edge rusher, whatever player you draft early, and I think they'll take at least one pass rusher with one of those first 3 picks, they're going to play. Like, they're going to be in a rotation with Carter and Ajoma and Jordan Davis at defensive tackle, or Nolan Smith and Azeez Ojulari and Jalix Hunt at the edge rusher position. But those guys, like, there's a lot of options already on the defensive line, at tackle, at edge. I think the positions that have the biggest opportunities for big roles this year are tight end, safety, and right guard. Now, tight end, there's an asterisk on this. It's if Dallas Goedert is gone. If he's not, that's a much smaller role. Still a big one, though, because he'll be gone after a year and he can't stay healthy. So one of these tight ends is going to start a lot anyway. But if Dallas Goedert's gone, that's obviously the biggest role, because a rookie that's drafted early, that's going to be a starter. Outside of tight end, though, I would say the other 2 positions that a rookie could come in right away and be the guy that's heavily relied upon, right guard and safety. As I mentioned, Tyler Steen, I think they believe in his floor, but I don't know if they believe in his ceiling. And if they draft a right guard in the first 3 rounds, I would say that guy's favored to start over Steen, over Kenyon Green. It'll be a may the best man win kind of battle in training camp. That's a camp battle in its purest form. But I think if a guy gets drafted early at right guard and he's not like a tackle guard hybrid, that guy's probably starting. And so that's obviously like the biggest role if Dallas Goedert's not back. It's funny, the offense is the more complete unit, and yet the 2 biggest roles that a rookie could step into and be a full-time guy is likely right guard and tight end. And then safety as well. If they draft a Malachi Starks, right, like, or a Nick Emenwari, or even a Winston, I should say, or a Watson from Notre Dame or Penn State, like, those guys are, I should say Xavier Watts. Sorry, I got those guys mixed up. Like, they're going to likely be starters. But if they draft somebody on day 2, day 3, later on, that guy's going to compete with Sidney Brown. I think they really do want to give Sid a chance to be the guy. But if they draft one of these players day 1, they clearly said, hey, Vic, like, choose your pick of the litter. What safety do you want? He's your guy. I think likely that player will start next to Reed Blankenship, and Sidney Brown's your rotating third safety. So I would probably say right now, gun to my head, in chronological order of the biggest role possible, I would say it's tight end, assuming Goddard's gone, tight end, right guard, safety, defensive tackle, and edge rusher. Those would be my top 5. Let me know what you think. Hit us up on X at LockedOnBirds, at DiBiase LOE. Always posting on our YouTube community page as well, at Locked On Eagles on YouTube. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast with my guys Keith Sanchez and Damian Parsons. They're going to get you ready for the draft, which is insanely enough only 3 weeks away at this point, which is insane. But they got you ready as well over at the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks as always for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.